Aurora Chen was 6 steps from the lab door when the night shift security guard stepped into her path. "You can't go in." Behind her, the investors stopped talking. The head of engineering stiffened. One of the Singaporean backers glanced at the locked door, then at the briefcase in Aurora's hand, the encrypted launch drive for the only working prototype inside that lab. In 8 hours, she would stand in front of the press and promise the world a technology no one else had managed to stabilize. Aurora kept her voice low. "Caleb, move." Caleb Price didn't. His faded silver jacket hung loose on his shoulders. His name tag was crooked. He looked like a man who should have apologized before speaking to her. Instead, he crouched by the sealed lab door and ran one finger along the hairline gap beneath the frame. When he lifted it to the fluorescent light, a faint gray dust clung to his skin. "Lithium residue," he said. The head of engineering snapped. "That's impossible." Caleb ignored him. He leaned closer to the door, nostrils flaring once. "Ozone, burnt insulation, and the cooling unit behind that wall is cycling too fast." For half a second, his voice thinned, as if the smell had pulled him somewhere he never wanted to return. Aurora's anger cooled by a degree. The cooling unit was supposed to be silent. She looked at the keypad beside the door. The access log showed the lab had been sealed since midnight. No one was supposed to be inside. Caleb straightened, his eyes fixed on the door. "Someone pushed the stack past its voltage limit,"
you can't go
he said.
through.
"If you open this door,
understand.
the
The seal must be
explosion won't wait
broken.
for tomorrow's
It's life
launch."
or death.
No one moved. For 3 quiet seconds, the corridor outside Lab 3 was still. Then Dr. Victor Sloan exhaled. "This is absurd," he said. "Aurora, with
You are not
respect,
authorized
this
to be
man has
here.
no
We have
clearance,
the authority."
no engineering authority, and no
Stand
understanding
down.
of what he is looking at." Caleb did not look at him. He was still watching the door, as if the steel itself might confess. Aurora turned toward the investors. 10 minutes ago, they had looked impatient. Now they looked careful. Graham Holt appeared at the far end of the corridor. He was Helion Ark's chief operating officer, the man who always arrived when a crisis needed a calmer voice. "What happened?" Graham asked. Dr.
You are
Sloan
not
pointed at Caleb.
authorized here.
Security
Stay back.
decided to perform an engineering review. A
We
few
have
people gave
clearance.
strained laughs. Graham looked at
Let
Aurora.
them through.
"We can move the
It's the
investors to
best
the
option.
conference room.
Just do it.
Let my team handle this quietly." Quietly. Aurora
Okay.
hated how tempting the word sounded. If word spread that the prototype lab was locked down because of a night guard's warning, Helion Arc might be finished before sunrise. Aurora looked at Caleb. "Step aside. Dr. Sloan will run the external diagnostic." Caleb finally turned to her. He already should have. Dr. Sloan's face flushed. "Excuse me?" Caleb pointed to the wall behind the keypad. "The auxiliary fan behind that panel kicked on 3 minutes ago. It cycles only when the internal temperature rises faster than the main cooling loop can compensate." Sloan gave a cold smile. "You are describing a system you have never operated." "I'm describing a sound," Caleb said, "and it is running too fast." Aurora stepped closer to the keypad. The screen showed green. "Lab sealed. No entry since midnight. Internal status stable." Everything official said Caleb was wrong. But the cooling unit kept breathing behind the wall. Too quick, too shallow. Aurora lowered her voice. "Caleb, why would there be lithium residue outside a sealed lab? There shouldn't be." "That is not an answer. It is the only honest one." One of the Singaporean investors, Mr. Tan, leaned toward Graham. "Is the prototype at risk?" Graham smiled without warmth.
This is irrefutable.
"We do not know that there is any risk yet."
Interesting.
Caleb held up his
Now, where
gray-stained
did you
finger.
find it?
"It
I
became a
have the
risk
proof.
before I got here." The corridor
What is he
tightened around
talking
that
about?
sentence. Aurora turned to Sloan.
It's not
"Run the
what
thermal
you think.
camera from outside the door." Sloan hesitated. It was small. Less than a second. But Aurora saw the pause before his pride caught up with his face. "Now," she said. A junior engineer opened a tablet and connected to the external thermal unit mounted above the corridor frame. The screen flickered, painting the lab door in dull blues and greens. At first, nothing looked unusual. Then Caleb stepped beside the engineer, careful not to touch the tablet. Zoom lower right, behind the secondary containment wall. The junior engineer glanced at Sloan.
Initiate
Aurora said,
containment protocol
"Do it."
for section
The image
4.
shifted. A pale orange bloom appeared behind the right side of the lab
Now.
wall. It was not large, but it did not belong there. Sloan's jaw hardened. That could be residual heat from yesterday's stress test. Caleb shook his head. Residual heat does not pulse. As if answering him, the The orange bloom brightened, dimmed, then brightened again. Mr. Tan took one step back from the door. Aurora looked at the tablet. How fast is it climbing? The junior engineer swallowed. Faster than the dashboard reports. That made the corridor go silent again. If the dashboard was lying, then the problem was no longer a hot component. It was a system someone had taught to lie. Caleb crouched again and looked at the bottom seam of the door. The pressure is pushing dust out through the frame. Sloan
Something
snapped.
is happening with this
There
door.
is no pressure event.
There is nothing
Then open
wrong
the pressure
with this
relief
door.
readout.
Stand
Caleb
down.
said. The junior engineer froze. Sloan said, "That is not necessary." Aurora turned to him. "Open it." The engineer tapped twice. A smaller panel appeared. Pressure relief valve. 12% open. Aurora read it once. Then again. "That valve should be closed," she said. Caleb nodded. "Unless the room is already bleeding pressure." Graham moved closer to Aurora. "We need to avoid overreacting. A partial valve response does not mean sabotage." "No," Caleb said. "But a partial valve response, rising heat, lithium residue, ozone, and a sealed access log means
Keep back.
someone wanted the room to look quiet while it was
What?
already failing."
It's open.
Before Sloan could answer, an alarm chirped from the tablet. Not the building alarm. Not yet. A small internal alert. The junior engineer went pale. Lab 2 just registered a spark event. A second later, a muffled pop sounded behind the service wall. The investors flinched. The overhead lights blinked once. A thin red warning flashed across the tablet. Thermal anomaly confirmed. Caleb stood slowly. "If you had opened that door," he said, "the oxygen shift could have fed the stack. The first blast would have taken the frame. The second would have come from the cells behind it." No one laughed this time. Aurora looked at the locked door, then at Caleb's crooked name tag, then at the gray dust still clinging to his finger. For the first time that night, she did not see a guard blocking her path.
You!
She saw a man standing
you
between
doing
her and
here?
a death someone might have already
I can't
planned.
let you in.
Graham spoke first. "We secure the floor. We move everyone upstairs. Dr. Sloan, you and I will review the diagnostics." Caleb said, "No." Graham turned slowly. "No?" Caleb pointed to the tablet. "Diagnostics are not enough. I need to see the sensor calibration file." The words landed harder than the alarm. Dr. Sloan went very still. Even Aurora felt the wrongness of that request coming from a man with a security badge. A night guard should not have known that file existed. Caleb wiped the gray dust from his finger with a folded tissue and placed it carefully into an evidence bag from the emergency cabinet. Then he looked at Aurora. "Someone
You need to
changed
see
what the
this.
system is allowed to admit," he said. "If we do not find where they changed it, the next alarm will be the one no one walks away from." By the time the investors were taken upstairs, Graham Holt already had a cleaner version of the story. A minor thermal irregularity. A precautionary review. No danger to the prototype. No reason to delay the launch. Aurora Chen heard those words through the glass wall of the executive conference room and knew how useful they sounded. Useful words were dangerous in a company that had 6 weeks of cash left. Below her, the launch stage was still glowing in the atrium. Workers adjusted lights around the podium where she was supposed to stand in the morning. Behind it, the Helion Arc logo waited on a blue screen, bright and confident, as if the building had not nearly swallowed her alive. "The future of clean energy." That was what the banner said. Aurora looked away from it. Dr. Victor Sloan entered first, still angry. Graham followed, calm enough to make everyone else look careless. Caleb Price came last, escorted by 2 security officers. He did not ask to sit. He stood near the wall, his eyes on the live system display. That bothered Aurora more than his silence. A frightened man would watch the room. Caleb watched the data. Sloan placed both hands on the table. "The situation is under control. We had an unstable reading. That is all." Aurora turned to the screen. "An unstable reading does not open a pressure relief valve." "It opened 12%, Sloan said. "That is a response, not a failure." Caleb spoke without raising his voice. A sealed lab should not need to bleed pressure. Sloan looked at him as if a chair had interrupted the meeting. "You are not part of this team." "No," Caleb said, "but the valve does not know my job title." Graham stepped between them before the room could split further. "Aurora, the investors are nervous. The board is already asking questions. We need one controlled message before rumor becomes valuation damage." There it was again. Controlled. Aurora had built her life around control. After her father died, she had taken Helion Arc from a half-funded research company to the edge of a breakthrough no competitor had managed to stabilize. The solid-state battery inside Lab 3 was not just a product. It was the last argument that her father had not wasted his life chasing something too fragile to survive the market. 6 weeks of operating cash. One prototype. One launch. One mistake away from being forced into a sale. She looked at Mira Patel, the junior systems engineer standing by the door. Pull up the emergency purge status. Mira connected her tablet to the main display. A system map filled the screen. Blue cooling lines, green containment zones, and one yellow icon blinking beside Lab 3. Emergency purge system. Status, armed. Mode, manual. Aurora read the line twice. Why is purge in manual mode? Sloan answered too quickly. Late-stage testing sometimes requires manual control to prevent unnecessary discharge. Caleb shook his head. Not after a midnight seal. Sloan's jaw tightened. You do not know our procedure. I know what a purge system is for, Caleb said. It is not supposed to wait politely while pressure climbs. Graham kept his voice smooth. Manual mode is not sabotage. It can be a procedural setting. Who authorized it? Aurora asked. No one answered quickly enough. That was the first real crack. Aurora remembered her father standing in the first Helion lab, back when the company could not afford proper chairs. He had told her that clean energy meant nothing if safety became a slogan instead of a rule. Later, marketing turned his sentence into wall text outside the research wing. A battery that can power the world must first be safe enough to sleep beside. Now the words felt less like inspiration and more like a witness. Show me the pressure trend from midnight, Aurora said. Mira opened the graph. The first line stayed flat for nearly 2 hours. Then, just after 2 in the morning, it began to rise in small steps. Not enough to trigger a main alarm. Enough to prove the room had not been resting. Caleb moved closer but stopped short of the table. Overlay cooling demand. Mira looked to Aurora. Aurora nodded. A second line appeared. It climbed in uneven bursts, matching the fast-breathing Caleb had heard behind the wall. Sloan said, Material settling can create slow drift. Not if the test stack is truly inactive, Caleb said. Mira looked down at her notes. It was marked inactive yesterday. Marked is not isolated. Sloan turned on her. Mira, do not speculate. She did not, Caleb said. I did. Aurora studied the graph. The line was small, almost polite. That made it worse. A dramatic failure would have triggered alarms. This looked designed to stay beneath attention. Graham's tablet chimed. He glanced down and dimmed the screen, but Aurora saw the name before it vanished. Elaine Mercer, board chair. Aurora's eyes narrowed. You called Elaine? Graham did not blink. I informed the board that we were reviewing a technical issue. Before I knew what the issue was? Before silence became liability. Caleb looked from Graham to the screen. His expression did not change, but Aurora sensed he had filed the moment away. She hated that she had noticed. She hated more that she needed him. Caleb, she said, you may observe the live readouts. You do not touch the system. You do not direct my engineers unless I ask you to. Sloan looked satisfied. Graham looked relieved. Caleb did not. Observation will not show who changed the setting, he said. It is what I am offering. If the system was altered, the screen may only show what someone wanted you to see. Aurora held his gaze. There was no performance in him. No attempt to sound brilliant. Just a tired certainty that made her feel, for one brief second, that he had stood in this kind of room before and watched official screens lie. What do you think is missing? She asked. Caleb pointed to the yellow icon. The person who put purge in manual mode after the lab was sealed, then expected everyone to call it procedure. Outside the conference room, the launch screen continued glowing. Inside, Aurora understood the real danger was not the heat behind the lab door. It was the authority that had touched her father's work in the dark, then left every dashboard smiling green. Aurora did not give Caleb access. She gave him a boundary. 1 chair, 3 feet from the operations table. 1 live display, no keyboard, no badge scan, no direct command to any engineer unless she approved it first. Dr. Sloan made sure everyone heard the rules. Mr. Price is observing, he said. Nothing more. Caleb sat without answering. The temporary command room had been set up in the glass-walled testing suite across from Lab 3. Through the reinforced window, Aurora could see the sealed corridor, the red status lights, and the closed lab door where Caleb had stopped her. The danger was no longer visible, but it had become more organized. On the main screen, Lab 3 appeared as a clean diagram: battery stack, cooling loop, purge line, containment wall, sensor bank. Everything had a label. That was what frightened Caleb. He leaned forward. "Show the thermal gradient map." Sloan gave a short laugh. "We already reviewed thermal imaging. Not the corridor camera, the internal gradient map." Mira looked at Aurora. Aurora nodded once. A color map spread across the screen, showing heat across the lab floor in layers of blue, green, yellow, and faint orange. Sloan pointed at the center. "The main stack is warm, but stable." Caleb did not look at the center. "Lower left," he said. "Near the secondary bus bar." Mira zoomed in. A thin orange line appeared where the map should have been blue. Sloan's smile faded. "That area is inactive." "Then why is it carrying heat?" "It could be bleed from the main system." "No," Caleb said. "Bleed fades outward. This line is feeding inward." Aurora stepped closer. The difference was subtle, but once Caleb named it, she could not unsee it. The heat was not spreading from the active prototype. It was entering from the side. Mira whispered, "That is the test stack." Sloan turned sharply. "The test stack was isolated yesterday," Caleb said. "Marked isolated? Maybe." Sloan's face hardened. "Do not play word games. Isolation is physical. Marking is paperwork." For the first time, one of the senior engineers moved without asking Sloan. He opened the lockout registry. A list of tags appeared. Each lockout tag had a serial number, a date, a technician, and a location. Mira read the line for the secondary bus bar. Tag B1769, applied yesterday at 6:40 in the evening. Caleb shook his head. "Pull the camera still from the outer panel." Mira found it. The image was grainy, taken from an inspection camera above the containment frame. A red lockout tag hung beside the bus bar housing. Aurora leaned in. The number on the tag was not B1769. It was B1786. Sloan said, "A clerical error." Caleb looked at him. "On a live energy isolation tag?" Sloan's voice sharpened. "You do not know our tolerance protocol. I know what happens when people call a broken chain of custody a clerical error." The words landed with more weight than Caleb seemed to intend. His hand closed, once on the edge of the chair, then released. Aurora noticed. So did Graham. Graham had been quiet since the test stack appeared on the map. Now he moved beside Aurora and lowered his voice. "We can document the mismatch and pause until morning. There is no reason to escalate further tonight." Caleb turned his head. "The heat is climbing now." Mira checked the trend. "He is right. Secondary bus bar temperature is up 3 degrees. 3 degrees is not critical," Sloan said. "It is not the number," Caleb said. "It is the direction." The main display chirped. Cooling demand increased again. Everyone in the room was thinking about consequence. Launch consequence, legal consequence, career consequence. Caleb was the only one watching sequence. He stood. One security officer stepped forward. Aurora lifted her hand. "Let him speak." Caleb pointed from the thermal map to the purge schematic. "The secondary bus bar is feeding heat into an inactive test stack. The purge system is armed but locked in manual. If we activate purge in the standard order, we push oxygen across a hot path before we lower the stack temperature." Mira went pale. "That could feed ignition." "It could," Caleb said. "Not enough for a full blast if we move now. Enough to damage the containment wall and make everyone call it a prototype failure." Sloan snapped. "You are speculating." Caleb looked at him. "Then run the simulation." Sloan did not move. Aurora turned to Mira. "Run it." Mira entered the current readings, the pressure value, the secondary heat source, and the manual mode condition. The first result appeared. Standard purge sequence. Oxygen spike risk, elevated. Containment stress, elevated. Cell instability risk, severe. Mira covered her mouth. Graham said, "Simulation tools produce conservative warnings." Caleb answered, "That is what they are for." Aurora looked at the schematic. "What is the alternative?" Caleb studied the screen, like someone counting steps across a floor he already knew could collapse. "Reverse the order," he said. "Open auxiliary cooling first. Drop the test stack temperature below the oxygen reaction threshold. Then release pressure through the west purge line, not the main line. Keep the main line closed until the secondary bus bar falls below trigger range.
Sloane almost laughed. That sequence is not in the current manual. No, Caleb said. It was removed because it slows the reset process. How would you know that? The question cut through the room. Caleb's eyes stayed on the screen. Because it used to be in older containment protocols. Older where? Aurora asked. Caleb did not answer. The temperature climbed another degree. Mira looked at Aurora. We need a decision. Aurora could feel every person waiting for her to choose the official expert or the man with the security badge. Her father's words rose again, safe enough to sleep beside. Run Caleb's sequence in simulation, she said. Sloane stepped toward her. Aurora, run it. Mira entered the steps. Auxiliary cooling first. West purge line. Main purge held closed. Manual release delayed. The second result appeared. Oxygen spike risk, low. Containment stress, moderate. Cell instability risk, reduced. Aurora looked at Sloane. Can your team execute it from here? Sloane's pride fought with the data for 3 long seconds. Yes, he said, but I am registering my objection. Registered. Caleb remained standing. One more thing. Do not open West purge more than 18%. Mira looked up. The model says 25. The model does not know the pressure valve already bled 12% earlier. Sloane's mouth opened, then closed. Aurora said, 18%. The engineers moved. Auxiliary cooling engaged. The orange line on the thermal map brightened once, then began to soften. West purge opened. 8%. 12. 16. 18. Mira held it there. The pressure curve dipped. The cooling demand stopped rising. Then the secondary busbar temperature fell. 1 degree. 2. 4. The red alert changed to amber. Mira let out a breath so sudden it sounded like a sob.
Mr. Tan, watching from the back of the room, spoke quietly. Miss Chen, who exactly is your security guard? Sloane looked away. Graham looked at Caleb. Caleb lowered himself back into the chair, as if the question had made him heavier. Aurora waited for him to answer. He did not. Instead, he pointed to the screen. The temperature drop bought you time, he said. It did not tell you who changed the tag. Aurora studied his face. There was no victory in it. Only recognition, as if he had stopped a fire once before, and still lost everything after the smoke cleared. Aurora found Caleb's personnel file in less than 4 minutes. That was the first strange thing. A man who knew emergency containment sequences, old purge protocols, and energy isolation failures should have left a trail inside Helion Ark's hiring system. Certifications. Former employers. Technical references. Something. Instead, his file looked almost empty. Caleb Price, security contractor, night shift, hired 2 years ago. No disciplinary history, except for 3 notes written by Dr. Sloane's department. Interfered with equipment during routine maintenance. Questioned lab technician about cooling alarm. Entered restricted service corridor without engineering clearance. Each note had been closed with the same recommendation. Keep employee away from technical operations. Aurora read the last line twice. Across the room, Caleb stood near the glass, watching Lab 3's temperature curve settle into amber. He did not look like a man relieved to be proven right. He looked like a man waiting for the next thing to go wrong. Graham had left to speak with the board. Sloane had taken 2 engineers to verify the secondary bus bar isolation. For the first time since the corridor, Aurora and Caleb were nearly alone. Elise Warren, Helion Ark's legal counsel, entered with a tablet under one arm. I searched external records, Elise said quietly. You need to see this. She placed the tablet in front of Aurora. The article was 11 years old. Fatal North Star Dynamics lab blast, blamed on safety oversight. Below the headline was a younger photograph of Caleb Price. No gray in his hair, no security badge, no faded jacket. He wore a white hard hat and stood beside a row of containment tanks, one hand lifted to block camera flash. Aurora felt the room shift around her. You were an engineer, she said. Caleb did not turn. I was. Senior safety engineer. For a while. Elise scrolled. North Star's report says you ignored multiple sensor warnings before a pressure event killed 1 technician and injured 3 others. Caleb's face did not change, but his hand tightened against the window frame. Aurora watched that hand. Oil scars along the knuckles. A thin burn mark crossing the back of his thumb. Not new wounds, old ones that had healed badly. Is it true? she asked. Caleb looked at the tablet, then at her. What part? The part where they said you ignored the warnings. No. The part where people died? His eyes lowered. Yes. That single word did more to silence Aurora than any denial could have. Caleb walked to the operations table and turned the tablet so the article faced away from him. North Star built industrial storage arrays for grid backup systems, he said. Bigger rooms, heavier stacks, slower software. But the failure pattern was not so different. Elise asked, "You are saying this happened before?" "I am saying official reports can make a lie look stable." Aurora heard the bitterness, but it did not spill. He kept it contained, like every other dangerous thing in the room. Caleb tapped the old article. The report said the pressure spike happened in 0.8 seconds after the warning. That is what made it my fault. They said I had a warning and did not act. Aurora frowned. Did you? I had a warning that should have triggered automatic shutdown before it ever reached me. He looked toward Lab 3. A pressure spike that fast does not start at the alarm. It starts before the alarm, when the safety interlock is already disabled. Elise became very still. Was that in your testimony? Yes. And? It disappeared from the final report. Aurora felt a cold thread connect the old article to the yellow purge icon, still blinking on the system map. What about the technician who died? She asked. Caleb's eyes closed for a moment. His name was Jonah Reed. He had a daughter who was 6 months old. North Star's lawyers were preparing to claim he had bypassed a service panel without permission. If they pinned that on him, his family would lose the settlement. Aurora understood before he finished. You took the blame. Caleb's mouth moved, almost a smile, but nothing warm reached it. I did not confess to causing the blast. I signed a limited responsibility statement. Poor escalation, failure to halt testing. Enough for North Star to close the case. Enough for Jonah's family to get paid. Enough to end my license. Elise said. That is not in the public file. No, Caleb said. Public files are for clean stories. Aurora looked at the photograph again. The younger Caleb seemed almost like a different person, but the eyes were the same, watching the room, not the people. She wanted to ask why he had never fought harder, why he had let them bury him, but the question felt too easy from someone who had never had to choose between her name and a dead man's child. Instead, she asked, why come to Helion Arc? Caleb glanced at the glowing lab map. Night work, quiet floors, a paycheck. No one asks a guard to explain what he used to be. That is not enough. It was enough for me. Until tonight. Until someone made this building sound like North Star. The answer struck harder than anger. Aurora thought of his voice thinning outside the lab door when he smelled burnt insulation. She had mistaken it for fear. Now she understood it was memory. Elise lowered her tablet. If Graham finds this before we understand the technical evidence, he will use it. He already will, Caleb said. Aurora looked up. You think he knows? Caleb's gaze moved to the door Graham had used when he left. I think people do not prepare lies after a crisis. They bring the old ones with them. For a moment, Aurora said nothing. Then she slid the tablet back to Elise. Seal the personnel review. No one outside this room gets the full North Star file without my approval. Caleb looked at her. That is not protection. It is temporary containment. That is what North Star called it. Aurora absorbed the hit. She deserved it. I am not asking you to trust me, she said. I am asking for enough time to prove what happened here before they turn your past into the only story. Caleb studied her, as if measuring whether she understood the cost of that sentence. Then the amber alert on the screen blinked once. Mira's voice came through the intercom from the testing suite. Miss Chen, Dr. Sloan found the physical isolation panel. A pause. He says the tag was changed by someone with master access. Aurora looked at Caleb. For the first time, he did not seem surprised. Only tired. Then your problem is no longer a faulty system, he said. It is someone with the authority to make a faulty system look official. Aurora gave them 1 hour. Not to solve everything. Not to accuse anyone. Only to build a timeline strong enough that no one could bury the truth under a cleaner explanation. The temporary command room changed shape around that order. Engineers who had been waiting for permission began pulling system records. Mira Patel opened archive test notes. Elise Warren requested access logs from security. Dr. Sloan stood at the far end of the table, stiff with insult, while Caleb remained beside the live display, watching the data like it might change its story when no one else was looking. Graham had not returned from speaking with the board. Aurora noticed. Caleb noticed that she noticed. Neither of them said it. "Start with the calibration file," Caleb said. Sloan folded his arms. "You do not get to direct this review." Aurora did not look away from the screen. "I asked him what to check. That is not the same as authority." "No," Aurora said. "It is called listening." Mira pulled up the sensor calibration file for Lab 3's battery stack. The metadata appeared first: file name, revision number, timestamp, authorizing account, checksum. For several seconds, nothing looked wrong. Then Caleb pointed to the revision field. "Why is there a fractional revision?" Mira leaned closer. "Revision 9.3. Sloan answered before she could. "Minor adjustment." Caleb said, "Safety calibration files do not get minor adjustments after final validation." Sloan's face tightened. "They do when test conditions change." "Then where's the validation note?" Mira searched. No linked note appeared. Aurora's eyes moved from the empty field to Sloan. He said, "It may have been stored separately." Elise stepped beside Mira. "Search by file hash." Mira entered the hash source. The system returned 2 records, one from the main server, one from the staging environment. Aurora frowned. "Why is a final calibration file in staging?" No one answered. Caleb's voice stayed quiet. "Because staging lets you test a lie before you ship it." The words struck Mira harder than anyone else. Her fingers slowed on the keyboard. Aurora looked at her. "Mira, I saw something yesterday," Mira said. "I did not think it mattered." Sloan turned sharply. "This is not the time for impressions." Aurora said, "Let her speak." Mira swallowed. The chemical storage labels in Lab 2 were different during the afternoon prep. The lithium salt container was on the upper shelf. By night audit, it was listed on the lower shelf. Sloan shook his head. "Labels are moved all the time during inventory." Caleb said, "Not before a sealed launch test." Mira opened a folder on her tablet. "I took a photo for the audit checklist." The image appeared on the main screen. It showed a metal cabinet, 2 white labels, and Mira's reflection faintly bent across the brushed steel. Aurora studied it. "This proves the labels changed. It proves someone changed the record of where things were," Caleb said. "That matters if they needed residue to appear in the wrong place." Elise's tablet chimed. "Security logs are in." The room shifted toward her. She projected a timeline across the wall. Badge entries, lab access, system changes, camera pings, server activity. At first, the sequence looked ordinary. Technicians leaving. Cleaning crew outside the research wing. Sloan's team closing out validation. Graham's executive access, appearing in administrative review logs. Then Elise froze the timeline at 2:07 in the morning. "Here," she said. "The calibration file is copied from main server to staging." Mira checked her own system. "But the main log records that at 2:14, Aurora turned. A 7-minute difference." Elise nodded. "The main server and staging environment disagree." Sloan said, "Clock drift." Caleb looked at him. "On 2 synchronized systems tied to launch validation? Possible. Convenient." Sloan's mouth hardened. Aurora felt the air sharpen. A 7-minute difference was not dramatic. That was what made it dangerous. It was small enough to excuse, small enough to miss, small enough to hide inside a night full of technical noise. "Who accessed staging?" she asked. Elise opened the permission trail. A single authorization token appeared. Executive access class. Chief Operating Officer level. For the first time, Graham's absence had weight. Sloan spoke quickly. "Executive access class does not mean Graham personally touched the file. Administrative keys can be delegated." Aurora looked at Elise. "Can they?" "Yes," Elise said. "But delegation leaves a secondary record. Find it." Elise searched. No secondary record. Caleb exhaled once through his nose. Aurora heard it. "What?" she asked. "That is not delegation," Caleb said. "That is someone using the master key and trusting everyone to be too polite to say whose hand it fits." Before Aurora could respond, Graham entered. His timing was almost perfect. Almost. He carried no tablet now, only his phone. His expression did not change when he saw the access trail projected across the wall. "Aurora," he said, "the board wants a written incident position, within 30 minutes. Aurora pointed to the screen. "Your access level appears in the staging copy." Graham looked at it, then at Elise. My access level appears in hundreds of administrative processes. That is why I have it. At 2:07 in the morning? I was awake. We all were. Launch week does that. Caleb said. Were you awake in staging? Graham turned to him with mild surprise, as if Caleb had spoken out of turn at a dinner table. Mr. Price, I appreciate your concern, but we are well past the point where speculation helps. Caleb did not answer. Graham looked back to Aurora. This is exactly why we need structure. Legal structure, communications structure, a defined internal review. Elise understood before Aurora did. She opened a document on her tablet, a non-disclosure agreement. Aurora read the first page and felt her jaw tighten. Who prepared this? Graham said, I did, for everyone involved. It protects the company while we determine what happened. Caleb stepped away from the live display. Does it allow reporting to industrial safety authorities? Elise scanned. Her silence answered first. No, she said. Not without executive approval. Caleb looked at Aurora. The room seemed to narrow to the space between them. Aurora said, This is temporary. So was North Star, Caleb replied. The words hit harder because he did not raise his voice. Graham sighed. We cannot have a security contractor leaking incomplete technical theories while investors are in the building. Caleb kept his eyes on Aurora. If the system is unsafe and someone stops me from reporting it, I become part of the cover-up. Aurora felt every pressure point close around her at once. The board, the investors, the launch, the employees who needed Helion Arc to survive. Her father's name glowing downstairs on a stage built for hope. And Caleb, standing in the same kind of room that had once erased him. She slid the agreement back to Elise. No one signs that version. Graham's calm finally thinned. Aurora, I said no. For a moment, she saw the smallest flash behind his eyes. Not anger exactly, calculation. Then it was gone. Of course, Graham said. We can revise the language. Caleb looked back at the access trail. The language is not the problem, he said. Aurora followed his gaze to the 7-minute gap, the staging copy, and the executive access class. For the first time, the investigation no longer felt like a search for a malfunction. It felt like following footprints through a room where everyone had been ordered not to look at the floor. Graham Holt did not accuse Caleb Price. That was what made the attack difficult to stop. He did not raise his voice. He did not call Caleb unstable. He did not say the word liar. He only asked for the review to become more formal, and within minutes, the small command room changed. 2 board members joined by secure video. Mr. Tan returned with another investor. Elise stood beside Aurora with the unsigned non-disclosure agreement still on her tablet. Dr. Sloan moved closer to the main display, as if standing near the data made it belong to him. Caleb stayed by the side wall. Graham let everyone see that. Then he spoke gently. Before we continue, I want to acknowledge Mr. Price's vigilance. His observations may have helped us avoid a difficult situation. The sentence sounded respectful. It was not. May have. Observations. Difficult situation. Aurora heard the reduction inside every polished word. Graham continued. But we have to separate observation from authority. Helion Arc cannot allow an unlicensed security contractor to guide an investigation into proprietary battery systems. Elaine Mercer, the board chair, leaned closer to her camera. Security contractor? Graham nodded. Night shift. Third-party vendor. No active engineering clearance. No current safety license. Sloan added, and no standing familiarity with our validation manual. Caleb looked at him. The manual missed the heat source. The engineering team confirmed the heat source, Sloan said. After I pointed to it. That answer helped the facts. It did not help Caleb. In that room, facts still needed the right badge before people trusted them. Mr. Tan turned to Aurora. Miss Chen, is he advising the company? Aurora chose each word carefully. He is a witness to technical anomalies he identified. Graham gave a small nod, as if she had confirmed his concern. That may be the safest framing, he said. Mr. Price can provide a statement. Engineering can review it. Legal can preserve evidence. But roles must remain clear. Roles. The word sat between them like a locked gate. Caleb said nothing, but Aurora saw his eyes move from Graham to the screen, then back again. He knew what was happening. Graham was not removing him from the room. He was shrinking the size of his voice. Then came the second attack. Graham touched his tablet, and an old headline appeared on the display. Fatal North Star Dynamics Lab Blast, blamed on safety oversight. A younger photograph of Caleb filled the corner of the article. Mira looked down at once. Sloan looked relieved. Graham looked regretful. This is not meant to shame anyone, he said, but the board needs context before weighing technical claims from Mr. Price. Aurora turned sharply. You prepared this. We prepare background on anyone influencing a critical incident. He was a security guard this morning, and now his opinion may delay a launch worth hundreds of millions. The argument was clean. Too clean. A public summary replaced the article. Failure to escalate sensor warning. Improper halt procedure. License revoked. Civil settlement sealed. The words were cold, short, and easy to believe. Aurora remembered what Caleb had told her. Public files are for clean stories. But the board had not heard that conversation. The investors had not seen his hand tighten when he spoke Jonah Reed's name. They saw only a disgraced engineer standing under a security badge. Elaine Mercer read the summary. Mr. Price, did your past actions contribute to a fatal event? Caleb waited one breath. A fatal event happened under my watch. That is not a denial. No, Caleb said. It is what I can say without repeating their lie. Graham lowered his voice. Trauma can shape judgment, especially when a present incident resembles an old one. Caleb gave a faint smile without warmth. There it is. Graham looked almost hurt. There what is? The part where a technical objection becomes a psychological problem. Sloan stepped in. This is governance, not psychology. You lost your license after a catastrophic failure. That matters. So does a changed lockout tag, Caleb said. And qualified people are reviewing it. Qualified. Mira's hand moved toward her tablet. The photo of the changed chemical storage labels was still minimized there. Graham noticed. Mira, he said softly, you are still on a student extension, correct? Her face tightened. Yes. And Dr. Sloan sponsors that extension? Yes. Then be careful. No one wants an intern blamed for spreading incomplete conclusions during an investor incident. Mira lowered her hand. It was not a threat. That made it worse. Aurora felt heat rise behind her ribs. Graham had not silenced Mira with force. He had silenced her with paperwork. Graham turned back to the board. My recommendation is simple. Suspend Mr. Price from further participation. Preserve his statement. Continue an internal review under engineering supervision. No outside reporting until we know whether this is truly a safety breach. Elise spoke. The evidence already suggests one. Sloan answered, It suggests irregularities, not cause. Elaine Mercer looked at Aurora through the screen. Aurora, decide whether this company is being led by procedure or panic. The sentence landed exactly where Graham wanted it. Aurora looked at the North Star summary, then at the timeline, the 7-minute gap, the chief operating officer access level, the missing delegation record, the tag mismatch, and the heat entering from the side. Caleb had a contaminated past, but the system had contaminated evidence. She finally spoke. Mr. Price is not directing this investigation. Graham's shoulders eased. Caleb looked down. Aurora continued. But he is not being removed. Graham's relief vanished almost too quickly to see. Aurora saw it. He remains as a witness to the anomalies he identified. Engineering continues review. Legal preserves all records. No launch decision is made until I have the physical isolation report. Elaine Mercer's mouth tightened. That is an unstable middle ground. Aurora held her gaze. So is trusting a clean report too soon? Caleb looked up. Not trust. Not yet. But something had shifted. Graham closed the North Star article. The screen went blank. The damage stayed. Aurora understood then that Graham had not needed Caleb thrown out tonight. He only needed every future truth from Caleb to arrive already stained. Aurora asked Caleb to follow her into the smaller legal room beside the command suite. No board members. No investors. No Graham. Only Elise Warren, one closed glass door, and the soft hum of the ventilation system above them. Caleb stopped before entering. Am I being removed? No, Aurora said. Then why the private room? Because if we keep arguing in front of the board, Graham controls the frame. Caleb looked at her for a moment, then stepped inside. The room was narrow, built for contract reviews and emergency calls. A long table divided it in half. On one side sat Aurora, still in the black suit she had planned to wear for the launch rehearsal. On the other stood Caleb, refusing the chair again. Elise placed a revised document on the table. "This is not the same non-disclosure agreement," she said. "The reporting restriction has been removed." Caleb did not touch it. Aurora leaned forward. "I need your help. You have a strange way of asking." "I know. That is not an apology." "No," Aurora said. "It is not." For the first time, irritation crossed his face. Not loud, not dramatic. Just enough to show he was tired of powerful people choosing careful words when plain ones were required. Aurora took the hit and continued. "Here is what I can offer. You stay inside the review. You keep access to the readouts through Elise. We hire independent counsel for you. Paid by the company, but selected by you. We preserve every record you identified. We do not launch until physical isolation is verified." Caleb waited. Aurora knew he heard the missing part. "And in return?" he asked. "In return, you do not contact outside safety authorities until we complete the internal review." Elise's eyes moved toward Aurora, but she said nothing. Caleb looked down at the document at last. "There it is." Aurora's voice sharpened. "Do not make this sound simple." "It is simple." "No, it is not. If this goes outside before we know enough, the investors walk. The board removes me. Helion Arc enters forced sale. Hundreds of employees lose their jobs, and Graham, or someone like him, decides what gets buried." Caleb's eyes lifted. "So I should help you bury it first?" "That is not what I said." "It is what the structure says." Aurora stood. "I am trying to keep control long enough to expose the right person. Control is what people ask for when they are afraid of accountability." The sentence struck cleanly. Aurora looked away first. Through the glass, she could see the command room. Graham was speaking to Elaine Mercer on the screen. Sloane stood beside him, arms folded, appearing useful again. Mira sat at the far station, still too quiet. Aurora lowered her voice. "You think I do not know what this looks like? I think you know exactly what it looks like. That is why we are in a smaller room." Elise said softly, "Caleb, there are legal steps that protect evidence." He turned to her. "Legal steps. Protected North Star, too." Aurora looked back at him. "Do not compare me to them. Then stop using their language." The room went still. For a moment, Aurora saw not the guard, not the disgraced engineer, not the inconvenient witness. She saw the man who had stood in another room while lawyers turned heat, pressure, and death into phrases clean enough for a report. "What language?" she asked. Caleb's answer came quietly. "Internal review, temporary containment, controlled message, incomplete evidence. Wait until morning." Every phrase means the same thing when people are already in danger. Aurora wanted to argue. Instead, she heard herself say, "If I call the authorities now, I lose the company." Caleb did not soften. "If you do not call them when the system is unsafe, you may keep the company and lose the reason it deserved to exist." That was the cruelest thing he could have said, because it sounded like her father. Aurora sat down again. Her phone buzzed. Then Elise's. Then the screen on the wall lit with an incoming board alert. Elise read it first. Her expression changed. Aurora already knew before asking. "What?" Elise placed the phone on the table. "Emergency board vote requested. Agenda. Temporary transfer of launch authority pending safety review." Aurora stared at the words. The board was moving faster than she expected. Or Graham had helped them move. Caleb saw the alert and understood. "If they take launch authority from you, who controls the review?" Aurora answered without looking away from the phone. "Graham." The name seemed to reduce the air in the room. Caleb stepped back from the table. "Then your internal review is already halfway gone." Aurora closed her eyes once, briefly. When she opened them, she was no longer speaking like a founder's daughter or a chief executive officer trying to survive a vote. She was speaking like someone standing at the edge of the same trap she had almost asked him to enter. "What would you do?" she asked. Caleb looked at the revised agreement, then at the board alert, then through the glass toward the lab wing. "I would stop asking who gets embarrassed," he said, "and start asking who had the power to make the building unsafe." "That does not answer the vote." "No," Caleb said. "It answers why the vote is happening now." Aurora looked again at Graham on the screen. He was calm. Too calm. She picked up the revised agreement and tore it once down the center. Elise inhaled. Caleb did not move. "I'm not asking you to sign silence," Aurora said, "but I am asking you to stay long enough to help me prove this before they hand the building to the man who may have done it." Caleb studied her. This is not trust, he said. I know, and if you try to contain this again, I walk out and call the authorities myself. Aurora nodded. Fair. The board alert chimed again. 5 minutes until vote. Caleb turned toward the door. Then we have 5 minutes, he said, to find one piece of evidence Graham cannot explain as procedure. They had 5 minutes before the board vote. Caleb used the first 30 seconds saying nothing. He stood in front of the live display, scanning the timeline again. Not the headline, not the board alert, not Graham's prepared explanations, only sequence. Aurora watched him from the doorway of the legal room. What are you looking for? Something physical, Caleb said. Something the system cannot rewrite. Mira's voice came through the command room intercom. Miss Chen, the physical isolation report is uploading now. The main screen changed. A still image appeared from the inspection panel beside the secondary bus bar. The tag mismatch was clear. The registry said one number. The physical tag showed another. Sloan spoke from the testing suite. The isolation panel was accessed after closeout. Aurora stepped closer. By whom? A pause. That is the problem, Sloan said. The panel camera cut out for 4 minutes. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Not cut out, he said. Covered. Mira opened another frame. On the edge of the image, a pale smear crossed the camera lens. She whispered, chemical dust. Caleb turned to her. Your cabinet photo. Open it again. Mira hesitated. Graham was back in the command room now, standing near the board screen. Aurora said, open it. Mira brought up the photo of the chemical storage cabinet. The changed labels were visible. So was the faint reflection on the steel door. Caleb stepped closer, but did not touch the screen. There, he said. Bottom right. The service cart. Mira zoomed in. A gray utility cart stood behind the reflected cabinet door. On its lower shelf sat a roll of white sealing tape and a narrow brush. Elise frowned. That could belong to maintenance. Caleb shook his head. Maintenance tape is blue in this wing. White tape is used for temporary sensor shielding during calibration. Sloan, over the intercom, said sharply, that is not conclusive. No, Caleb said, but it tells us where to look. The live display beeped. Mira's face changed. Secondary temperature is rising again. Aurora looked at the graph. The orange line had begun to climb. Why? She asked. Mira checked the cooling schematic. Auxiliary cooling is dropping. Caleb's voice went flat. Someone shut the west loop remotely. Graham stepped forward. Can engineering restore it? Mira typed quickly. Remote control is locked. By whose authority? Aurora asked. Mira swallowed. Engineering master access. Sloan's voice came through, defensive. I did not authorize that. The temperature climbed another degree. Then another. Caleb looked toward the service corridor door. Aurora saw the decision before he moved. No, she said. If the west loop stays closed, the test stack heats again, Caleb said. Tell engineering. They are locked out. Then wait for override. There may not be time. He turned toward the corridor. One security officer stepped into his path. Caleb looked at Aurora. Your system is being used against itself. If I wait for permission, permission becomes the weapon. Aurora wanted to stop him. She also knew he was right. The board screen chimed. 3 minutes until vote. Graham said, Aurora, do not let him touch anything. Caleb moved before Aurora answered. He did not run. Running made people chase. He walked fast, using the side corridor that led past the fire cabinet and into the narrow service passage behind Lab 3. The security officer followed. Aurora followed them both. The passage was hot, low-ceilinged, and loud with hidden machinery. Caleb stopped beside a gray panel marked Cooling Loop Auxiliary West. A red digital lock blinked on the handle. Aurora reached him. Can you open it? With my badge. No. Then what are you doing? Caleb pointed beneath the panel. Manual breaker. That is not a control switch. No, it is better. It cannot be edited from upstairs. He pulled open the lower cover. An alarm chirped at once. Unauthorized panel access. Graham's voice came through Aurora's earpiece. Security breach. Remove him now. Caleb ignored it. He scanned the breaker labels, found auxiliary west pump relay, and placed his hand on the lever. Aurora grabbed his wrist. Caleb, if this logs under your badge, it already did. The heat behind the wall pulsed like a living thing. Caleb looked at her. And for the first time that night, She saw fear. Not for himself. For the room. If this stack crosses threshold again, Graham will not need a vote, he said. The blast will decide for him. Aurora released his wrist. Caleb pulled the breaker down, waited one beat, then pushed it back up. The machinery behind the wall coughed, shuddered, and restarted. A deeper hum moved through the passage. Mira's voice burst through the intercom. West loop restored, temperature falling. Aurora closed her eyes once. Then the second alarm sounded. Unauthorized interference recorded. Badge ID, Caleb Price. Panel, cooling loop auxiliary west. Time stamped. Graham did not waste the moment. By the time Aurora and Caleb returned to the command room, his accusation was already on the main screen. A clean red line had been added to the incident timeline. Caleb Price accessed auxiliary cooling panel without authorization. Graham stood beneath it, expression grave. This confirms my concern, he said. Mr. Price has been physically interfering with critical systems. Aurora said, he restored the West Loop after it was locked remotely. Graham turned to her. According to him, Mira saw the temperature fall. Graham looked at Mira. Mira froze. Sloan entered from the testing suite, pale and furious. The system logs only show unauthorized panel access. We cannot prove his action corrected anything without a full sequence review. Caleb looked at the screen. Because someone locked the remote control first. Graham sighed. Or because you created the condition that made your intervention look necessary. The room changed again. This time, even Elise had no immediate answer. The board screen flashed. Vote paused pending security escalation. Aurora understood the move. Graham no longer needed to win the technical argument. He had moved the story into security. Elaine Mercer's voice came through the speaker. Aurora, you cannot keep him in that room after this. Caleb did not defend himself. That somehow hurt more. He looked only at Aurora. She wanted to say no. She wanted to say everyone had seen enough. But Graham had built a red timestamp, a badge record, a panel alarm, and a frightened board into a cage around Caleb before she could reach him. Aurora spoke slowly. Security will hold Mr. Price in the adjacent room while legal preserves the full sequence. Caleb's eyes lowered. Not surprised. Only disappointed that the pattern had completed itself again. The security officer moved beside him. As Caleb passed Aurora, he said quietly, "Do not let them review the sequence without the remote lockout." Then he was taken through the glass door. The door closed. For the first time since the lab alarm, Caleb Price was no longer in the room where the truth was being decided. And everyone left inside knew the systems had just become easier to lie about. Caleb Price watched the room through glass. They had put him in the adjacent security office, not a cell, not yet. One guard stood by the door. Another watched the command room from a wall monitor. Caleb stood behind him, silent, studying the screen. Inside the command room, Graham was already rebuilding the story. The red line on the incident timeline remained bright. Unauthorized panel access. Badge ID, Caleb Price. It looked simple. That was the danger. Aurora stood near Elise, arms folded, her face unreadable. Mira sat 2 stations away, pale, with her tablet pulled close to her chest. Sloan was talking quickly to Graham, but without his earlier confidence. Then the elevator doors opened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out carrying a black case. Graham turned as if expecting him. Dr. Harlan Vey, he announced, independent safety consultant, former Federal Review advisor. He has agreed to provide an immediate outside assessment. Aurora looked at Graham. You found an independent consultant at this hour? Preparedness is not guilt, Aurora. Dr. Vey opened his case on the table. He did not ask for raw data first. He took out a printed summary. Caleb leaned closer to the monitor. That is wrong, he said. The guard glanced at him. What is? He brought an answer before he saw the system. Inside the command room, Vey began. The signs described here are consistent with stress test residuals, not sabotage. Lithium traces, thermal drift, even auxiliary cooling irregularities can occur in late-stage validation. Aurora said, Can they occur with a tag mismatch and remote lockout? Vey smiled politely. If the prior record is incomplete, yes. Elise looked at the screen. The staging copy would clarify that. Mira typed, then stopped. Her face changed. The staging log is gone. Aurora turned. Gone? Removed from active archive. I can see the shell, but not the contents. Sloane looked shaken. That should require administrative purge authority. Graham spoke before anyone else could. Or it was never preserved correctly because an unauthorized person interfered with the system. He looked toward the glass. Everyone knew whom he meant. Caleb did not move. On the monitor, Vey pointed to the red timeline. Given the badge record, the cleanest immediate conclusion is that Mr. Price created or worsened the cooling instability, then presented his action as corrective. Mira whispered, "That is not what happened." Graham heard her. "Mira," he said gently, "please do not expose yourself again. We need verified records, not impressions." Her mouth closed. Aurora's eyes hardened, but Vey continued. "Recommendation: suspend the launch, isolate Mr. Price from systems, preserve his statement, and designate his interference as the primary event pending review." Primary event. Caleb almost smiled. That phrase had killed careers before. It took the first thing people could prove and made it the first thing that mattered. The guard in the security office looked at Caleb. "Rough night." Caleb pointed to the monitor. "Zoom that." The guard frowned. "I am not supposed to take instructions from you." "Then do not. Just look at the printed report in his hand." The guard hesitated, then used the monitor control. The image tightened on Dr. Vey's report. Caleb read the top corner. Preliminary Incident Assessment. Prepared, 2:31 a.m. Caleb looked at the wall clock. 2:38 a.m. His panel access had happened at 2:34 a.m. "He wrote the conclusion 3 minutes before I touched the panel," Caleb said. The guard stared. Inside the command room, Aurora was speaking. "Dr. Vey, when was this report prepared?" Vey glanced down. "A few minutes ago." Aurora stepped closer. "Before or after Mr. Price accessed the cooling panel?" Vey paused. Graham answered for him. "The timestamp may reflect template generation," Elise said. "Then provide the draft history." Vey closed the folder slightly. "That will take time." Caleb turned to the guard. "Open the room intercom." "I cannot." "You can. It is for emergency communication. I will lose my job. If they finish this, so will everyone else." The guard looked at Caleb, then at the monitor, then pressed the intercom button. A soft tone sounded inside the command room. Everyone turned. Caleb's voice came through the speaker. "Ask him why his report was prepared before the event he claims caused the incident." Graham spun toward the glass. "Shut that off." Aurora raised a hand. "Leave it." The guard froze with his finger over the button. Caleb continued. "And ask where he got the phrase auxiliary cooling irregularity before the west loop was restored. That phrase was not in the room until after the panel access." Elise checked the report copy on screen. Her expression changed. "He is right." Dr. Vey's jaw tightened. "This is improper," Aurora said. "So is a conclusion written before the evidence." Graham's calm finally cracked at the edges. "Aurora, you are letting a detained security contractor direct a board-level review through an intercom." "No," she said. "I am letting a witness point to a timestamp." Mira stood suddenly. "I have something else." Graham turned to her. "Mira." This time she did not sit down. She connected her tablet to the screen and opened the chemical storage cabinet photo again. The cabinet, the labels, the cart, the white tape, the brush. Then she zoomed into the reflection on the steel. At first, it looked like nothing. Then a shape appeared near the lab doorway. A man in a dark suit. Graham. The image was bent by the metal, not clear enough to convict anyone, but clear enough to show he had been outside Lab 2 during the window he claimed he was upstairs with investors. Aurora looked at him. Graham did not look at the photo. He looked at Mira. That was his mistake. Aurora saw the threat before he could dress it as concern. Elise spoke first. "We have a prepared report with a premature timestamp, missing staging logs, and an image placing Graham near the lab corridor." Vey closed his case. "I was asked for an emergency assessment, not a courtroom defense." Caleb's voice came through the intercom again. "Do not let them keep this internal." The room stilled. Aurora looked toward the glass. Caleb stood behind it, still detained, still doubted, but no longer silent. The board screen flashed. Elaine Mercer's voice came through. "Aurora, if you call outside authorities, the launch is dead." Aurora looked at the Helion Arc logo glowing on the far wall. Then she looked at the yellow safety icon still blinking on the system map. "No," she said. "If I do not call them, Helion Arc is." She turned to Elise. Contact the Industrial Safety Authority. Now, put it on record, and open the room. Graham's face went still. Behind the glass, Caleb stepped back from the monitor. For the first time that night, the truth was no longer trapped inside Helion Ark's permission system. The Industrial Safety Authority arrived before the board could cancel the call. 2 inspectors entered through the service elevator with sealed evidence kits, body cameras, and the calm faces of people who did not care about launch schedules. Their badges changed the temperature of the room faster than any cooling system had. Aurora met them at the door. "I am Aurora Chen," she said, "Chief Executive Officer of Helion Ark. I requested the safety intervention." Elaine Mercer's voice came through the board screen. "Aurora, you have just killed the launch." Aurora did not look back. "No," she said. "I stopped pretending it was alive." Graham's expression remained controlled, but only at the surface. Caleb was brought back from the security office. He entered quietly, with one guard behind him and every eye in the room measuring whether he was witness, suspect, or both. Aurora turned to the inspectors. He identified the first anomalies. Let him present what he saw. Graham stepped forward. "With respect, Mr. Price is currently recorded as having unauthorized access to a critical panel." One inspector, a woman named Reyes, looked at Caleb. "Is that true?" "Yes," Caleb said. The room tightened. He continued, "And the system was remotely locked before I opened the manual breaker. If you review the remote lockout first, my access stops looking like cause and starts looking like response." Inspector Reyes nodded once. "Show us." Caleb did not give a speech. He asked for the objects. The sealed residue pouch from the lab door, the thermal gradient map, the physical lockout tag, the cabinet photo from Mira's tablet, the auxiliary West cooling timeline, Dr. Vey's preliminary report, the khaki-colored test tray removed from the secondary stack housing. One by one, the items reached the table. Caleb began with the residue pouch. "This was outside a sealed lab before my badge touched any panel. If pressure pushed lithium residue through the doorframe before my intervention, then the instability predates my access." Inspector Reyes marked the pouch. Caleb pointed to the thermal map. "The heat did not begin in the main prototype. It entered through the secondary bus bar, into a stack marked inactive." Mira opened the enlarged lockout image. "The registry says B1769, Caleb said. "The physical tag says B1786. That is not a typo. That is a broken isolation chain." Sloan swallowed. For the first time, he looked less angry than trapped. Caleb turned to the test tray. "Now this." The tray looked ordinary at first. Pale metal, 4 clamp marks, a faint brown line along one edge. Caleb asked Mira to bring the ultraviolet inspection lamp from the emergency kit. Under the lamp, the brown line sharpened into a curved corrosion pattern. "This is overvoltage staining," Caleb said. "It forms after sustained electrical stress, not after a 3-second manual breaker reset." Inspector Reyes leaned closer. "How long?" "Hours." Aurora looked at Graham. Caleb did not. He continued, "The clamp pattern matches Helion Ark's older validation rig, the one assigned to Sloan's team. Not security, not maintenance." Sloan's face drained. Graham said, "This is interpretation." Elise stepped in. "Then let us add timestamps." She opened Dr. Vey's report. "Prepared at 2:31 in the morning," she said. Caleb's panel access occurred at 2:34. Inspector Reyes looked at Vey. "You concluded his interference before it happened?" Vey closed his case halfway. "It was a template. Then provide the draft history." Vey did not move. Aurora saw the room understand. "Not everything. Enough." Mira stood beside the screen, hand shaking but voice clear. "I also have the cabinet photo." She zoomed into the reflection. The image bent across the steel door, imperfect but readable. Graham near Lab 2's entrance, beside the service cart carrying white sensor shielding tape. Graham finally lost his softness. "That reflection proves nothing." "No," Aurora said. "Alone, it does not." She connected Elise's tablet to the display. A document appeared. Term sheet. Conditional Acquisition Framework. Graham went still. Aurora faced the room. This was found in Graham's encrypted board packet after legal preserved his communications. If Helion Ark suffered a major safety failure, and I was removed for launch negligence, the acquiring company would appoint Graham as Transition Chief Executive Officer. Elaine Mercer said nothing. The inspectors read. The investors read. Sloan read, then slowly sat down. Graham looked at Aurora with something close to hatred. "You had no right to search that." Aurora's voice did not rise. "You had no right to turn my father's lab into a weapon." Graham's mouth opened, but Sloan spoke first. "He told me it was a containment stress test." Everyone turned. Sloan looked smaller now, stripped of title by his own fear. "He said the board needed a reason to delay the launch without admitting financing weakness. I changed the tag. I thought the stack was isolated. I did not know he had altered the calibration file." Graham snapped. "Victor." Sloan flinched, then kept going. "When Caleb asked for the thermal map, I knew he had seen it. The side feed. That is why I tried to shut him down." Inspector Reyes looked at Graham. "Mr. Holt, step away from the table." For a second, Graham did not move. Then the second inspector placed himself between Graham and the evidence. The command room was silent except for the cooling system behind the walls. Aurora turned to Caleb. Everyone saw it. The chief executive officer, in front of board members, investors, engineers, lawyers, inspectors, and the man who had nearly buried him, looked at the night shift guard and said, "Mr. Price, Helion Arc should have listened sooner." Caleb did not smile. He looked at the test tray, the residue pouch, the tag, and the map. "Listening is not the same as believing," he said. Aurora nodded. "Then we start with the record." She faced the room again. On the record, Caleb Price did not create this incident. He identified it, slowed it, and preserved the evidence we nearly let someone else erase. The words did not repair 11 years. They did not give Caleb back everything Northstar had taken. But for the first time that night, the clean story belonged to the truth. Part 11. Recognition, symbol, legacy. The launch did not happen the next morning. The stage was taken down before sunrise. The blue Helion Arc screen went dark. The press chairs were folded. The prototype remained sealed until the Industrial Safety Authority finished its first inspection. By 8 in the morning, the company had lost the bridge financing. By noon, Graham Holt had been suspended. By evening, every employee knew something had broken inside Helion Arc long before the battery system did. 3 days later, Aurora Chen called the entire company into the atrium. No investors stood beside her. No board members spoke for her. No prepared slogan glowed behind her. Only the employees were there. Engineers, assistants, lab technicians, reception staff, maintenance workers, interns, and the night security team that usually left before executives arrived. Caleb Price stood near the back. He had chosen the back. Aurora saw him anyway. She stepped to the microphone. "I am not here to tell you the company was saved," she said. "I am here to tell you why it still deserves to be." The atrium stayed quiet. Aurora looked down once, then continued. 3 nights ago, a man in this building saw signs the rest of us were trained, pressured, or too proud to ignore. He was questioned because of his job title. He was doubted because of a report from his past. He was detained after doing the one thing that kept a dangerous system from crossing threshold again. Caleb's eyes lowered. Aurora did not let him disappear. On the official record of Helion Arc, Caleb Price did not cause the incident in Lab 3. He identified it. He slowed it. He preserved the evidence. And this company failed him before it listened to him. No one clapped at first. That was better. Applause would have made it too easy. Aurora turned toward him. "Mr. Price, if you are willing, Helion Arc is creating an independent safety review office. It will not report to engineering. It will not report to operations. It will have authority to stop any test, any launch, any demonstration, at any level. I am asking you to lead it." The room turned. Caleb stood still. For a moment, he looked almost angry. Then, Aurora understood why. A title could become another cage if it was offered like charity. So she added, "Not as a favor, not as repair. Because you were right, and because we need someone who knows what happens when a system learns to lie politely." Caleb looked at the floor. Then he said, "I will review the charter before I answer." A small laugh moved through the atrium. Not mockery. Relief. Aurora nodded. "Good." 2 weeks later, the door to Lab 3 opened again. Not for a launch. For inspection. The same steel door stood at the end of the corridor. The same keypad glowed beside it. The same narrow gap ran beneath the frame, now scrubbed clean of gray residue. Aurora arrived with the inspectors, Mira Patel, Elise Warren, and 3 engineers from the new review team. This time, she did not step forward first. Caleb stood before the door with a printed checklist in his hand. He checked the external seal, the pressure record, the cooling demand line, the isolation tag, the purge status, the physical override panel. He took his time, and no one rushed him. Aurora watched him pause beside the bottom frame, where his finger had first found the dust. The corridor was quiet. Not tense this time. Waiting. Caleb straightened. "System stable," Mira said from the tablet. Caleb looked at the screen, then at the door. "Stable is a condition," he said, "not a promise." Mira wrote it down. Aurora almost smiled. Then Caleb gave one short nod. Only then did Aurora scan her badge. The door unlocked. The sound was soft, but everyone heard it. At the beginning, Caleb had stopped Aurora from entering her own lab because no one believed him. Now the most powerful person in the company waited for his clearance before stepping through the same door. Inside Lab 3, the prototype sat behind reinforced glass, silent and intact. Beside it, on a shelf marked "Evidence Retained," was a small sealed vial of gray residue. Aurora had asked if Caleb wanted it removed. He said no. Some reminders were not wounds. Some were warnings that had finally been respected. 6 months later, Helion Arc launched again. There was no giant slogan on the screen this time. No promise that sounded too smooth to be true. Aurora stood before the press and introduced the battery only after the Safety Authority published its report. The new protocol was simple enough for every employee to remember. Stop work authority. Any employee could halt a test. Any intern could call a safety review. Any guard could report an anomaly without waiting for someone with a higher title to believe it first. Mira Patel became the first full-time engineer hired into Caleb's new office. Dr. Sloan resigned before the investigation ended. Graham Holt faced charges for evidence destruction, securities fraud, and reckless endangerment. North Star Dynamics, under pressure from the same authority, reopened the old blast file after Elise sent over Caleb's sealed statement and the matching interlock pattern. One evening, after most of the building had emptied, Caleb stood alone outside Lab 3. The cooling unit behind the wall ran in a slow, even rhythm. No fast breathing. No hidden strain. No polite green lie. Aurora stopped beside him, but did not ask if he was all right. She had learned that some questions were only another way to demand comfort from the person who had been hurt. Instead, she listened with him. After a while, she said, "System stable." Caleb kept his eyes on the door. "For now," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "That is why we keep listening." The lab lights dimmed for the night. This time, the silence did not feel like something waiting to explode. It felt like a building finally learning how to tell the truth.